Well, here we are. It is Friday, April 21st, 2023, and this, of course, is the weekly video. We do these every Friday. We take a look at the eBay auction results for Chinese and Japanese art, what's been going on in different places, what's happening in the big auction world, and so forth, things that are on the global member pages, and all that other good stuff that we try to cover every week. Just for those of you that are regular subscribers, know if you've seen it, yesterday we did the first of the videos of the replies. As you know, we have the inquiry service based over on the homepage here. And one of the things that people do, they send in images of things that they own. They want to find out what they are, how much they're worth, and so forth, or something they're thinking about buying at auction. And they submit them. And we've decided we'd ask people if they'd be willing for us to share those videos. We'll build them into a put in several clips and build it into a few videos each week. Many of you have said, sure, fine. Some of you don't want to. That's fine too, because maybe it's something you're thinking of selling or something that you're maybe thinking of buying, and you don't want to expose it, perhaps. But we did the first one yesterday, and we're sort of tuning that up. I think it came out pretty well. And it gives you a look at what people hear and what they see when they send something in, and it's an interesting experience for us, because it's amazing the things that people come up with. It's interesting. You never know where a great object is going to come from, and we see a lot of stuff that's not great, but people are trying their best to learn, and that you want to encourage that. All right. So anyway, moving on. Let's see. At the end of the video, stick around for the end, because there's a sale going on right now. They've had parts of it earlier this week. It's happening down at Sotheby's. There's an exceptional collection, that of the Wolf family, that's being sold. They were major collectors in many areas for a long time. And Bernard and Joyce Wolf have passed away in the last few years, and their collections are being auctioned off over the course of, I think, 5 auctions, including their library. And they're getting some phenomenal results. And I'm going to go through some of the China trade stuff, the Chinese export stuff, and whatnot that they had collected, because they collected some of the best pieces you've ever seen. And I'm going to go through a couple of them. It's fun. All right, now what's happened on at eBay last week? Well, there were a number of good things. So we've commented before that there seems to be a revitalization of decent objects coming back to eBay, which had dissipated rather severely a year or two ago, a couple of years ago, and now it seems to be getting better. And one of the things that was sold was this incense stick holder, or joss stick holder from the Ming Dynasty. It's a nice little bronze. And what was interesting about it was that it was also painted. There was this red pigment used on it, and that's not something that's unknown, but it didn't happen all that often, or if it was done, it didn't last. It got rubbed off, it got worn off, came off the surface over time from being cleaned and touched and so forth. And here's one that still has some significant traces of that red pigment that would simulate red lacquer, like the figure standing on a red lacquer stand, a red lacquer plinth. And they also used a little bit of the red on his belt here and so forth. This was a nice casting. Nicely done, old patina. This looks like it came out of somebody's basement. It's kind of dirty, which is the way you want to see them. You don't want to see, people love to buy them right out of the house. And this was being sold by Roofes over in the UK. Let's see, how tall was this thing? 19 centimeters tall, so it was pretty good size. That would be about. What is that? About 8 inches in height. So it's a good sized bronze. And I think it was a good buy, $610. Not a bad buy at all. Not a bad buy. And it looked to be quite intact, which is always nice, because some of these bronzes, they get dropped or banged, they lose a finger or a hand, something happens. Piece of the robe breaks off, or it gets broken off the stand altogether. That one was intact. The other one was this. This is probably an 18th century or so bronze. Nice Chinese bronze, though. Good deep brown patina. They had listed it as, I don't know what date they put on it, pre-1800. Yeah, 18th century, that's about right. It did well. It ended up selling for $1,225. And as we've seen over the last few years, these later bronzes are gaining increased traction. It wasn't that long ago that a vase like this, a bronze like this, back in the 80s and 90s, I remember. Well, that seems a long time ago, I guess now. But at any rate, back then, a bronze like this could be bought almost from any antique shop for a couple of $100 at the most. 200, 250, and so forth. There was a dealer I knew in Salem, Massachusetts, that had a great little shop there, and he got a lot of content, some old Salem houses on Federal Street and down in that area, Chestnut Street. And what I always found interesting was that he always had really good Ming and Sung bronzes in his store. And what I learned was that in the late 19th century, they became very, very popular with wealthy old families from Salem and Victorian households and stuff, and they loved buying these late Ming bronzes. And at that time, of course, they were being imported because a lot of stuff was coming out of China around then, between the 1870s to 1900, through the China trade, and there was the economic turmoil, and things were being exported out and being bought up all over the country. But it seems that Salem was sort of a hotbed of early Ming bronzes, and I used to go in there and buy them all the time. And there wasn't a lot of interest in them at that time, and now there is. I wish I had a lot of them back. But at any rate, that's what happened. And like I said, this kind of bronze at one point would have sold for a couple of $100. And now it's $1,225, which is the way it goes. And then over to this. Now, this was an interesting Yixing teapot. We talked about it briefly last week. And I was curious to see how it would do, because as you can see, how it would do in the sale, because it had a replaced spout, replaced finial, and a replaced handle. In other words, it had had a long life, but it was a really beautiful piece of Kungshe Yiqing ware. And Yiqing, of course, was some of the first, when tea first was being imported into Europe, when it became a huge fad, they quickly began also importing right along with it a lot of Yiqing ware. And Yixing became so popular in Europe that they began copying it themselves in a red clay. And today, sometimes it's a little tricky to tell the difference between some of the red clay pieces made in China and the red clay pieces made in Europe during the 17th and so century. But this was a nice one. It appeared to be a Kungshe example. Very finely worked. Loved the monkey on here. And despite missing its spout and handle in the original finial, it still brought $1,373. And it's all because of the artwork. The artwork on this was so good that you just had to like it. That's all there is to it. And apparently the spout and the handle didn't bother anybody too much. But I should point out that had it been complete and with its original parts, it probably would have brought $5,000 to $7,000. So it's not that it didn't have an impact, but it still has considerable value despite the damage and repairs. And then over to this, a very nice little Famille Rose flattened, sort of a moon flask shaped snuff bottle with an interior scene of a couple of figures and tables and so forth. Nice little snuff bottle. And there's a second scene on the other side. I don't think it was marked. I don't think it was. No, it wasn't marked, but it was a very nice example and in beautiful condition, probably from the Tungshi period or so, or early Guangxu, somewhere in that era. And it ended up selling for $537. And as everybody knows, there's a huge number of people out there that are snuff bottle collectors, and they amass enormous collections, hundreds and hundreds of bottles. And then over to this, the Catagon. I sort of went on about this last week because I thought it was such a great looking one. It was so beautifully potted. The glaze was so nice on it. I really thought it was terrific. I think it was one of the best Celadon and underglazed red and blue Catagons I'd seen in a few years. This was a really choice example. 18th century, nice details, nice color. I love this flared foot. You can see where the glaze pooled up under here. The handle was and the handle and the spout were both intact. There were no chips on the spout. It had been kept beautifully for many, many years. Here's a close-up of it that has got a very pleasing sort of a greenish blue Celadon tone. If it was a little darker, it would almost look like Clair de Lune. But it had got a lot of interest. It was up to around $1,200 or so last week, and we thought it would jump a bit, and it did. It ended up selling for $2,410, which is one of the highest prices we've seen for one of this form on eBay, I think, in a number of years. But it was a great example, and I hope one of you bought it because it's a super piece. And then the same seller had this very nice transitional period Shunji polychrome jar with children on it. And I like this a lot. I mentioned it last week. I just thought it was always interesting when there's activity and kids and so forth. It looked to be in pretty good shape, and it brought $1,621. And that's partly because there's an enormous amount of popularity right now in demand for transitional wares and Shunzi works of art and so forth. The Butler collection, the famous book, the reference book out there that's called Shunzi. Lots of illustrations, lots of good information in it, and here's a nice jar that somebody picked up. I think for a perfectly reasonable price. And there was this, the Robe, a late Qing, sort of an everyday wear robe. It's not a court robe, but a rather elegant one, beautifully made, lovely deep sapphire, almost royal blue ground. It's very strong, very dark colors, and it's got the wave, the bands at the bottom with flowers floating on them. We see that sometimes, but the quality of the work on this was very good, and the colors were vibrant. Because Chinese robes are notorious for fading, especially not the blues so much. The blue doesn't tend to fade, but the other colors, the yellows, the pinks, and the greens, are very susceptible to fading. And this robe looked like it had been kept very nicely in a trunk or out of light for most of its life. So here it is today, years later, in perfect condition. And I think this was a very fair buy. Somebody paid $1,154 for it. I wouldn't have been at all surprised if this had brought $2,000 to $3,000. Not in the least bit surprised, because it was in such good condition, and it was high quality work. The quality of the work always carries the day, and that was a nice example. As far as the quality is what brings the demand. In other words, I guess. And over to this, there was quite a bit of good silver this week, Chinese silver on eBay. I hesitate to call it export silver because not all of it was, and it's the term export silver has sort of become overused. And if you read up on the history of it, a lot of it was not made per se as export wares. They were just silversmiths working in China, and much of it was exported and much of it wasn't. At any rate, there's this beautiful reticulated bowl. We talked about it last week. It's got the flaming pearl in the center there, and that would be a spot where you could put your initials or your monogram or something like that if you wanted to, and sometimes people did. But this was a beautifully made example. There you can see the reticulation. Meticulously done. Really meticulous. And probably done in Hong Kong back around 1900 or so. Ended up selling for $475. But I don't think it was signed, so it didn't bring what some pieces bring. But it was very good work. All right, and then over to this. We're going to get back to more silver. There's more silver I know on the list here, but we're gonna work our way over to it. And then over to this 18th century water can or water jug, Chinese export, famille rose. I thought this was a very nice example. Really nice. The handle had a hairline in it, but that was about it. But it had its original top, which is sort of unusual because they often are missing their tops. And let's see here. There it is. There's the lid, and it's in good shape. For a minute, when I first saw it, I thought maybe it had a finial on it that got knocked off. It never had a finial. It was just a dome top with lots of gilding and red outlining and so forth. But a nice 18th century example, probably made about 1780. And somebody bought this, I think, for a very reasonable price, $386. This is a nice piece. If you like unusual bits of China trade, this was a good one. I love the birds. Love the birds on it. Very well made. And what's up here next? Oh, the robe. There was a very nice silk embroidered silk skirt with a lot of gold thread on it. Also in excellent condition. Nice colors. I don't see any real damage to it anywhere. There it is, opened up. It looked fine, and it sort of brought on the high end of what skirts bring. The skirts typically bring between 300, 325, and 400 and 475, somewhere in there often. This one did a good bit better. It brought $621, but it had loads of gilt thread on it, and the colors were good. It had just one little band of slight fading in the middle in that red area, which is probably, it was folded in a way that got a little sunlight exposure or something, and so forth. That's usually what that means. It was folded in a way that light hit part of it for a little too long. If you own silks, don't ever hang them in a room with any direct sunlight, whatever you do. They can have light coming into the room, but not direct dark sunlight on the silk ever, even if it's under glass. And even if it's coming, or if it's coming through the windows of your house, it still will cause fading. The glass on if it's hung and framed, it helps, but it doesn't block it. It doesn't block it nearly as much as people think. So if you hang things like this, or Chinese paintings on paper and whatnot, be sure you don't put them in a place that's going to get regular direct sunlight on them, each morning for a half an hour, each morning or afternoon for an hour, because eventually it will cause them to fade out rather significantly. All right, and then over here, this is a piece by Wang Hing, another good silver bowl with a dragon on it. Wang Hing was one of the most famous of all the Chinese silversmiths, the Chinese workshops. There's his mark, 90 on here, which means it's 90% pure silver, which is just about sterling level. They don't often put that on there. But this was a really fine one with excellent details. And that's what Wang Hing was known for. Their workshop was known for these very, very fine, incise decorations all over the piece, and great relief work, very expressive faces on the dragons and other creatures that you'll find. And just this sort of sinuous serpentine body floating around. Very, very nice. And this did pretty well. It brought $790. It was made, according to the seller, it was made around 1895. And this is a seller that's sort of come along. I haven't seen a lot of his things. I think he sells other silver as well. But what he's got is, and this was also inscribed. This was a presentation piece to a British gentleman living in Hong Kong at the time. But he does an extensive write-up. What a look for these. He's done the research on it. He's got the name of the maker who made it, and a bit of information about him. He was in business from 1842 to 1941. It wasn't the original owner, of course. At the end, it was I think it was the sons or the grandsons at that point, and located in Canton or Hong Kong, and with all the description. So this guy does a good job. The seller does a good job explaining what it is and giving all the details. I think a lot of silver sellers shoot themselves in the foot by not going the extra mile and digging out the information, providing biographical and some background information about the seller, about the item being sold. Rather, it plays a big role in that. Especially if somebody collects Wang Hing, because unless you put Wang Hing in there somewhere and you run a search on eBay for it, it's not going to find it unless you tell eBay that it's there. And then there's a piece by Bao Jing who's a silversmith in Canton, and he had this sort of Tibetan silver with the monkeys and so forth, stippled ground. Very nice teapot. Nice tall teapot done in a Western form. Excellent quality all the way through, done probably around 1900, and it brought $934. He was well known, but I don't think he wasn't as well known as Wang Hing and some others. But their work was outstanding, and there were hundreds of good silversmiths. This is the thing that's really interesting. There were hundreds of good silversmiths working in Hong Kong and Canton in particular at the end of the 19th century. It's a real interesting thing. And many of you know there's a book on it over on the reference section on Bidamount, all about China trade and Chinese silver in general. All right, and then there was this. This was by Wing Fat, another well-known silversmith from the period. And again, marked 90 degree silver, 90 grade silver, and so forth. A very, very, very attractive bowl, also inscribed. How different were they? They were pretty different. Yeah, never mind. And this did really well. This brought $1,226. But again, it had a very interesting inscription on it, and worth learning about. And this is the same seller that does a good job describing things for the collector, and it did fantastically well. All right, and then over here to this. This was one of the bargains of the week. This was from the Shangri-La guys. It was this very, very nice piece of Totai Shippo cloisonné porcelain from Japan. And what this is basically it's a cloisonné technique that was developed by the Japanese, where they, instead of putting the wires over a bronze like they do in Chinese cloisonné and some Japanese cloisonné, and then filling in those the little areas created by the wires, they overlay the wires onto a porcelain body, and then apply enamels and then refire it. It's a fairly complicated and tricky situation to reheat things in this way, because you can crack the pieces because you're adding a considerable amount of thickness onto it. And the failure rate was fairly high when they first began making these. These vases weren't terribly tall. They were about 5 or 6 inches tall. But 19th century Meiji period, very finely done. I think they were in quite good condition. Let's take a look here. Overall condition, basis, small chips, firing flaws, minor minimal wear, 6 inches tall. And somebody bought these, got an absolute steal, $43 they paid for these. This was a really great bargain. And this is why I often say, people in the inquiry side, and some of you have heard me say it before, if you're interested in buying and selling Japanese art, buy it at auction and sell it retail. Sell it at a fixed price. Because the arbitrage, the spread between auction prices in Japanese art and the retail prices through a store focusing on collectors is fairly significant, sometimes 200 or 300%. Selling Japanese art at auction is a risk, unless it's amazingly rare, like you have got an original copy, one of the big prints of the Great Wave or something like that. But in general, Japanese material is a roll of the dice in the auction market if you're putting it in there, and it's very irregular. In one auction, a piece one day might bring 150, 200, 300, and then another day it might bring 700. And there's no way of predicting it, because it's a fairly thin market as far as market demand goes. But people that have stores, if you go into a good Japanese gallery, a gallery that specializes in it, you'll see some real pricing for what people pay in a serious market for good Japanese material. But those buyers tend to focus and work on things with dealers, because they want to get the interesting things first. And the truth is, that's also true of many other things. When we take a look at the Wolf stuff, you're going to see that they bought a huge amount of their stuff from the Ralph Chait Gallery, and very little of it came from auction. All right, now over here to this. A very, very nice framed silk with these roundels on it. A very nice example, probably taken from a larger hanging or maybe from the back of a robe or something, but super quality. And 19th century, ended up selling for $367. And lastly, of the sold things, we're going to get to some things that are coming up, so hang around. It was this brush pot, and I had a number of inquiries about this brush pot, because some people thought, is this a transitional wear brush pot, or is it something else? No, this was an early 19th century brush pot. It was accurately dated. He said it was possibly earlier, which is, I mean, of course, anything is possible, but I don't think this one was. I think this was an early 19th century Chaiqing, maybe the early Daoguan period brush pot. Because you can't really make it anymore. You can't narrow it down too much. And here they are, some people playing Go and so forth. It was a nice pot. It was genuinely a good brush pot. And it went for $448, which is right about what it's worth. All right. Now, what is coming up on eBay? A few things. One of the things I want to mention again, I talked about these porcelains last week when they had just gone up. They close tomorrow. Is this armorial set of blue and white. Very unusual pattern. Very fine quality. This looks like early Qianlong stuff to me. Very, very nicely done. And this plate has a day and 10 hours to go. It's up to $355. And then there are also some plates with a somewhat similar pattern, different central design, another armorial type, but with the same border decoration. And these look awfully nice too. This one has a hairline and a little chip, but it's only up to $26. There's several from this seller, Rokas, and he's a seller in Alberta, Canada, and they will be on the newsletter page. So check it out. But I got a feeling the platters and the Zitterine are going to jump at the end. But some of the smaller plates, if you like the pattern and you're hunting on a budget, you might want to check out some of the smaller ones. You might be able to pick those up for considerably less. Because sometimes when you have big pieces in an auction, they sort of suck all the air out of the room. Everybody focuses on the big pieces that are likely to bring a lot of money, and they forget that the smaller pieces that are also of great quality might be an extremely good buy. So leave a bid, all right? Leave a bid. By the way, I heard from a couple of people this week that got some real surprises. One of them, one fellow got a particularly great buy. He's a global member page user, and he left a bid on something. And he said that he wrote me a note, and he said that I left a bid that he thought was so low there was not a chance in the world he would get it. Well, something happened, and maybe the auctioneer was quick with his hammer or something, and he ended up getting it for about $100. And it was a pretty nice piece of porcelain. He should have brought probably $600 or $800. So you never know. Leave a bid. Always leave a bid. All right. And then you have these. These are on there right now. A pair of 18th century Famille Rose Mandarin scene trumpet vases or sleeve vases. These look pretty good. I don't see any real problems with them. The bases are intact. Good condition. Any repairs or anything? No hairlines, no cracks, no chips. Generally good. Good. Tiny nibble to one of the rims. Tiny nibble on the bottom rim. Okay, so it's got a frit mark or something, a couple of frits. These close on Sunday. They're up to only $174. They should go for $500 to $700, but we'll see. So if you want to take a shot at them, go leave a bid. Try it. And then this is coming up too. Now this has a hairline in it. It's not perfect, but what I liked about this bowl and all that, you have to take that into account when you place bids. But I love the use of this underglazed red, the cafe border, and the way they did the blue around the panel. Sort of unusual. There's sort of an unusual layout. There's the hairline in the bowl, and it's got the very nice sort of figural mandarin scenes that you see on lots of Chinese export wares. But the composition with this blue and white border and so forth, the bowl measures about 9.5 or 10 inches in diameter. It's sort of interesting. And here's one of the hairlines. It's got an old iron staple repair in it, which I think is great. And that is probably that little staple is what's kept this bowl from that crack splitting the bowl in half eventually. Because what happens is you get a rim on a bowl and it starts to creep down, and if it creeps down far enough, it crosses over the area where the foot rim is that supports it, that gives it some strength. And once it gets across there, it's a very quick trip to having the crack go all the way to the other side, and the bowl literally will split in half like an apple. It'll just eventually one day it'll just come apart. And that staple is what's holding it all together, I suspect, at this point. But it's a nifty bowl. It's only up to $27. It closes on Sunday, and as a nice shelf piece, I think it's still worth $175 to $250. And if it was perfect, it would probably bring around $500 to $600. All right, and then over to this. This is a nifty painting. This is a pith painting. Those of you that like pith paintings, this is I think it's hard to say exactly what this is because the scene is quite unusual. But it looks like this is the Monkey King, and a meeting with a traveler, and a Lohan of some type, and he's taking his hat off to look up at him. But you don't see this kind of subject matter very often in pith paintings. There's the Monkey King. I'm pretty sure that's who it is. And normally you see things on pith paintings because pith paintings were generally done for export, and they were done primarily to show rice making and paper making and porcelain making, and maybe paintings of the interiors of little painting workshops in Canton. Skilled people, craftsmen making things, showing how itinerant cobblers or woodworkers and this sort of thing. More general everyday life, sort of extolling the beauty of Japan, of China rather, because it was an area of massive interest in the West during the 1840s, 50s, and 60s when pith paintings were being produced. But this is an unusual subject matter. To see this, and when I saw it, I thought, "Why? It's on pith," and I would think it would be on paper, and it wouldn't have thought of it being done for the export market. But if it was done on pith, it was done for export. And it may have been done as part of an album of Chinese mythology or perhaps some sort of religious focus. But at any rate, here it is. And if you like unusual pith paintings, this is unusual. And it's rather nicely done. It looks like it's in pretty good shape. And it's got 8 days to go. And right now the bid's up to it's got 4 bids. It's up to $6.85. But if you're interested in unusual and atypical Chinese export watercolors, this to me looks like a $300 or $400 picture, just because the subject matter is so unusual, so atypical. And if you collect these, go and look and see if you can find any others like it. If you collect them or in your own collection, or in Crossman's book or any of those publications, or at Christie's, see if you can find a similar. I bet you can't. All right, and then over to this, speaking of pictures, is this. This is a nifty thing. Normally we don't do a lot because this is a European engraving, but it's a European engraving that was done around 1796 of the Emperor Qianlong. And if you always wanted to have a sort of a nifty picture of Qianlong, here it is. As you can see, the paper has a good bit of foxing to it. And if I had this, I might consider taking it to a paper conservator and having them just dip it. They can actually submerge these in a liquid that'll help neutralize and stop the foxing from progressing, and often reverse a good bit of it. Because this is an interesting subject, and it would be terrific framed. Especially if you collect 18th century porcelain and you're interested in the history and life of this gentleman, because he was such an influence. And there's all the information. Right now, it's up to nothing. It's got 5 bids. It's up to $3.99. And I think if you bought this, and it's good size. It's not tiny. It's 29 by 19. So it's basically a foot tall by 8 inches wide. So with a mat, it would make a significant framed bit of art for your house. And like I said, it's I believe it's English. Yeah, I think that's English. 18th century, right at the end of the 18th century. So if you like it, go after it. Go after it. It's nice to have things like that around. And this is coming up. This is nice. It's an armorial for Milrose. Rose. I guess it would technically be Rose Canton plate with fish all over it, which is interesting. Fish, being from Gloucester, we like our fish. So anyway, this is a fish plate with landscape figural scenes around the outside, and then the interior armorial crest on it. It was probably done around. Let's see here. Fred Warren, leaving Grosse Pointe. Info on back of card. I don't know what that means. It was written a few years ago, I guess. But here's the crest with the 2 figures on it. This plate was probably made around 1830 to 1840. It's up to $111. It's got 2 days to go. It'll be on the newsletter page, and it's probably, how big is it? Before I say what I think it's probably worth, it's 9 by 9. Okay, it's decent size. It's not. I was wondering if it wasn't 3 or 4 inches, one of those very small ones. It's 9 by 9 inches, so it's basically the size of a dinner plate. It should bring $350 to $500. It's a nice plate, nice piece of porcelain. It looks like it's in good condition. And this, another dragon robe. Dragon robes are always popular. This one's up to $4,500. Late 19th century example. Nice weaving on it. The colors look pretty good. The gilt threads, I don't see a lot of damage to it. It had been worn a little bit, but I don't see a lot of gold thread pulls. So always look for gold thread pulls here. The closure band is quite nice on it. The sleeves look good. There's a little bit of wear on the sleeve, but it doesn't matter. There are the rocks at the bottom. There's a couple of twin fish. Very nice, rather unusual with the twin fish pattern, and all those and on the groundwork with all these rue heads floating around, fungi. It's up, like I said, it's up to $4,516. It'll probably go up another $1,000 or $1,500 before it closes. But if you're a robe buyer, you know what they're worth. And this one looks like it could use a cleaning. I would, if or it's just got washed out by the light a bit. But to me, it looks like it might be a little bit dirty. And you can get these cleaned. You go use a good textile conservator, though. Don't send it out to the dry cleaners. I know somebody that did it once. They bought a robe for $16,000 and they took it to the dry cleaner. And when they got it back, it was pretty much destroyed. The dry cleaning solution they used was a bit harsh, and the gold buttons got all corroded, and it was a mess. Don't do that. Get a hold of a good textile conservator and let them do their thing. It's going to cost you $700 or $800 to get it clean, probably, but it's worth it. All right, now this 18th century Qianlong period teapot and caddy. The caddy's rather nice. It's got a little chip out of the lid, but the pattern is very tightly done, very, very nice. This one is nice as well. It's a very well-known pattern done. They made a lot of these between 1780 and 90 for the export market. This closes on Monday. It's up to $340 or 273 pounds, and it'll probably go up another 100 or 150 before it's finished. But if you collect 18th century Mandarin, porcelains, this is a nice package. And this is coming from Arthur Potts has this. He's out in Dorset in the UK. He gets good things. We've featured his items many, many, many times. He's quite knowledgeable from what I've seen. And he's got a number of these pieces up for sale right now at auction. And we'll have them all on the global pages. We like to feature things that Arthur finds. And then lastly is this, Yuan, early Ming period arrow vase. This is a rather nice one. I like the relief work on here. It looks like it's a little bit corroded down below. Something that I think a little cleaning, not with heavy detergents, damp cloth, and then apply a little bit of oil to it. That was one of the tricks I learned many years ago. There was a dealer, he's still around, Michael Goodweese over in the UK. He's a very sharp dealer. He handles all kinds of stuff. But for a time, he handled, he may still, I don't know, actually, I shouldn't say, but he used to handle a lot of really good Sung, Ming, Yuan bronzes. He loved bronzes and early bronzes. And somebody that knows him, and I was dealing with him, said, yeah, he likes to get them, just wipe them down carefully and then give them a little oil to nourish the bronze surface. And he used to do that a lot. And I always thought his things looked so nice. He'd get them and clean them up. And it's up to, what is this? It's got one bid. It's up to $399. How tall is this thing? 7 inches. So it'll get up there. It should bring $700 to $1,000. But we'll see. We'll see. We always have to see. But this is the auction I wanted to talk about. The Spirit of America, the Wolf Collection. Now, parts of it have already closed and finished. It's brought millions and millions of dollars. I think this segment of the sale brought about 38 million US. And there's 5 of these sales. So there's also I think this is also the sale that had the Fitzhenry Lane painting, which was by an artist from where I am, here in Gloucester. He was a very famous marine painter in the 19th century and coastal painter. One of the best paintings he ever did. It was of the coast of Maine, belonged to the Wolf family, and it brought $6 million. So they have major stuff. Great. They also collect Paul Manship material. And Paul Manship, the bronze sculptor, lived right up the street from where I am. Literally, we could walk there in 2 minutes. And I knew the family. They were Margaret Manship and John Manship. Were both artists as well, and really nice people. And John Manship was always willing to help us when we did auctions. If we came up with a Manship bronze, he would be delighted to come over and look at it and tell us where and when it was made. And in the office, he sometimes would have paperwork, designs and so forth from his father's archives, because Paul Manship kept everything. The house was full of stuff that he had done. Anyway, that's another story. If you don't know who Paul Manship is, if you've ever seen the Prometheus at Rockefeller Center, that was done by Paul Manship, and he also did the arches to the gate to the Bronx Zoo, I think. He did a lot of major bronzes over the years during his lifetime, and he lived in Gloucester. He was a very well-liked man. I didn't know him. He died before I was around, but he was apparently loved by everybody. And now this is one of the things I wanted to talk about, was this punch bowl. When was the last time you saw a punch bowl, trying to trade punch bowls, sell for $177,800? And it wasn't that it was a massive bowl. It was only 15 inches in diameter, but it had a very unusual decoration on it in puce, and it's a European street scenes on the left side and the Hongs of China on the right side, and with these Rococo cartouches around it, and very finely painted, really, really fine work. And the interior had figures on enamel going around the interior of the bowl. This was an absolutely great bowl, possibly one of a kind, but a great rarity, made around 17. They're dating it to about 1765 to 1770. It was in beautiful condition. It's had let's see, good property, good provenance. It came from the collections of Francois Rouvet. It was sold at Sotheby's in Monaco in 1987 and was bought by Ralph Chait Galleries, New York. And the Wolf family bought it from Ralph Chait. And you're going to see, when you go through this thing, people say, well, I always like to buy at auction, you know, da-da-da-da-da. When you look at collections like the Wolf's had no problem buying a lot from dealers. They like to cultivate dealers. They like to buy from them. The dealer would do the work, and the Wolf's one of their favorite places to shop was Ralph Chait Gallery, which was in New York. They lived in New York. They lived on the Upper East Side. They had an amazing townhouse there. Anyway, they eventually ended up moving to Florida. But they had the best of the best of the best, and a lot of what they bought came from dealers. And this is something they bought from Ralph M. Chait Gallery, and they probably paid dearly for it because you pay a premium. But look what you end up with, and it's not uncommon. When you look around a lot at Chinese and European painting collectors and so forth, you very often find some of them rarely shop at auction. They like to work with a dealer. They like the information a dealer can give them. And then another part of the sale, that was just one day, but in their other sale, and this sale is actually happening today, right now, live now. It's going on right this minute, but they've sold a number of the lots. Let's refresh the page to see if they've added anything since I looked at it a half an hour ago. There we go. Some of the results are already up, and I'm just going to go through a couple of them. But if you love great Kungshe pieces, great Qianlong pieces, unusual pieces, big vases, very tall vases, in unusual forms, I urge you to go through the Sotheby's results and look carefully at some of these examples and look at the prices realized, because they did fantastically well. One of them was this Kungshe period brush pot with figures seated around a table. This was a really, really rare pot. I believe they got this from Ralph Chait Gallery also in 1986. They seem to have bought a lot of their Chinese Kungshe wares and so forth in the 80s. I think they were sort of on a binge. And it was estimated at $40,000 to $60,000 US, sold for $127,000. But an absolutely splendid pot. There it is. Beautiful quality, finely painted. You know, it's kind of the best of everything going on, and that's why you go to, if you're in America or you're in Europe, you go to places like Ralph Chait, Marchantz, Eskenazi, or William Schack in Hong Kong, because you want to be sure of getting the very, very best. And just as a little heads up, the Joyce, Irving and Joyce Wolf collection here. Expect to see that sticker reproduced all over the place. For some reason I called him Bernard Wolf. It's Irving Wolf. I apologize for that. And there's the Chait label. And when you look for Chait labels, make sure the center is filled in, because they always fill them in. They don't just print them and hand them out. And this was a heck of a nice brush pot. And then over to this. This was a really unusual thing. This is a Kungshe period box, porcelain box. And you don't see these very often. You see a lot of boxes were made sort of toward the end of the 18th century, and a lot of them during the 19th century, especially the Guangxu period, or after the Jiaqing period. You see lots of boxes were made in these circular boxes. This is a Kungshe example, and it's absolutely beautiful quality, beautiful white ground, dragons running around on the top of it, and then precious objects and so forth around the bottom. How big was this? This was 13 inches in diameter and sold for $82,000. And then lastly is this. This is getting back again to transitional wares. This one they bought also, I think, from Ralph Chait. They did. And it came, let's see, it came from, this is the vase that belonged to President Herbert Hoover. A lot of people don't know, Herbert Hoover loved Chinese ceramics. He had a significant collection. And he passed it down to his son, and then it was acquired by Chait Gallery in New York, and they sold it to the Wolf's. And this was a heck of a great one. And it was estimated at $40,000 to $60,000. And as we've seen especially in the last couple of years, the prices of these pieces, transitional pieces, has risen significantly. But this one was outstandingly well painted. The thing that really got this thing going was the quality of the painting. Absolutely superb. Very, very refined. Unbelievably refined. It looks almost like the best of the Kungshe pieces to some degree. The way the plants are done here, the balustrade, the three-dimensionality of it, had a real depth of field to the piece. And here's the bottom of it, and that's what the bottom of one of these should look like. And it's got the Hoover Collection label on the bottom. It's got an inventory number on it, Ralph Chait, New York, and then again the Irving and Joyce Wolfe label on the bottom. But what a great piece of transitional wares. And how big was this? About probably 16 inches high. Okay. Ended up selling for $203,200. And those of you who have been buying transitional wares for a while know that kind of price. And we saw a lot of the stuff that came out of the Butler collection that did very, very well too. Shows you just how much interest there is, and I think there's a ways to go yet on the values of transitional and Chunzi period, that sort of mysterious mid-17th century era when it wasn't for a long time a lot of interest in any of it. Now it's got a cult following, it seems. But this was a fantastic vase. I really can't say enough about it. I probably should shut up, but I just love this thing. Absolutely beautifully done. All right, that's it for the week. If you enjoyed the video, leave a thumbs up, leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't done that yet. I hope you do. We're almost at exactly 20,000 subscribers, by the way. I think we'll probably cross that Rubicon in the next day or two, which will be fun. And on we go from here. Thanks for watching. Come over to Bidamount and poke around. Use the forum and join the global member pages if you're really looking a lot. There's a lot of material on there right now. Also, of course, there are links off the Sotheby's section on the global pages to the Sotheby's sale that's going on right now. And there's a whole bunch of stuff for sale in Europe right now. I think the Coronari sale, if it isn't gone, I think the Coronari sale already finished up. But there's been other sales over there that have been awfully good lately. And we'll be talking about those in the next week or two also. All right. Have a wonderful weekend. Spring is here. It's already April 21st, and we're hoping to get finally some warm weather. It's only in the 40s here today, but that's the way that goes. All right. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next week. Bye-bye.